I like this move. A lot of it's kind of like 50-50 right now in the sports world. Russell Wilson to the Steelers.
That's a joke, yeah.
So to provide a little bit of context for the viewers, Broncos had Russell Wilson on a giant contract where I think the remaining amount of money on the contract was probably like $50 million, and they ended up cutting him. They're still responsible to pay him. So wherever Russell Wilson decides to sign, he can sign for a veteran's minimum, but that still means he's getting paid $50 million from the Broncos. So the question became, when he got cut by the Broncos, who would you rather, your team's quarterback or Russell Wilson on a veteran's minimum? Because he's still getting paid from the Broncos.
He's made Pittsburgh San Francisco now. Pittsburgh now has a front line for $1 million, and they've got the rest of their brand new extra $30 million, $28 million cap space to go out and fill the team out around a guy who's capable of winning a Super Bowl.
But so you're getting Russell Wilson, an elite quarterback, at the veteran's minimum, but it's because Russell Wilson isn't taking a pay cut, he's still getting paid by the Broncos. Sports world's kind of split because, half the people think he's washed, half the people don't think he has it anymore, and a lot of people are stuck onto that culture issue he had at the Broncos. But to me, I think the main issue lied in they brought Russell Wilson in from Seattle to build the culture in Denver. When you think about the culture built on the Seahawks, Russell Wilson wasn't necessarily responsible for it. You had guys like Marshawn Lynch, and during the prime years, they were labeled the Legion of Boom because of their defense. Russell Wilson's passion for the game was undeniable, and that's why he was such a great quarterback for them. But the culture wasn't necessarily reliant on him. When you brought him in to build the culture, that's when a lot of these issues really started surfacing, where people were calling him a prima donna. He needed his own parking space, his own office, his everything else. And so if you're trying to build the culture with that kind of guy, that's why I don't think it was going to work. If you go to somewhere like the Steelers, guy like Mike Tomlin, he's never been below 500 for his entire career. He's always had a winning record. Their culture is already defense. They brought in the coach from Atlanta, who's a very early 2000s, late 2000s type of offensive coach. Run it down your throat. Get a running back that's totally violent. Guys like T.J. Watt are already there. The culture there is already established, and you're bringing in a guy like Russell Wilson who still has that passion for the game, who doesn't necessarily need to build the culture in Pittsburgh. It's already a historic franchise. He'll be able to come in and hopefully do what he used to be able to do. And, what do you think?
Well, the one thing about Russell Wilson is, though, I'll take exception to that. I think he's an absolute gamer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe he did get a little full himself. But at his core, I think he's an absolute gamer. I'm one of the guys that happened to follow him in college, North Carolina, Wisconsin. Where did he go? Wisconsin?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin? Yeah. First he was at North Carolina, and then he transferred to there. In both places, he took, not that great schools pretty far. And then he started to do the same thing in the pros, and he did he was a gamer. I mean, he was a come-from-behind winner type of thing. So I think he'll mesh well with, if he goes back to the old Russell, if there is such a thing, with Tomlin and the cap space. It's all about cap space now. If you can get Russell Wilson for $1 million a year, I don't know how Tomlin talked him into that. I mean, yes, he got his money from Denver, but he still could have gotten 20 from him, and then he would have made it 70 million, or So hats off to him. He's taken a little bit of money to go out and show what he can do. He's probably going to hope to get 30, 40 million next year if he does something with the Steelers. But how can you not do something with the Steelers? They've been winning with no quarterback for the last 3 years.
That his passion for the game is undeniable, and that's why he's taking something like a vet minimum just to keep it, just to make it work for the Steelers, just to prove something. That's the other thing I need to kind of dispel is he didn't have that bad of a season last year.
You can't look at him and say he was the problem in Denver.
But what I mean to say is the argument a lot of people are saying is he's washed, he can't do it anymore. And if anything, you can say he's getting older and still trying to, make one read, and he just gets out of the pocket right away, and maybe his reaction times aren't there. That's the main argument I'm hearing. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are just saying he's just straight up washed. He can't do it anymore. But when you look at last year, his completion percentage was the third highest in his entire career, 66%. He still threw for 3,100 yards. And to compare that to his prime year, his completion percentage was 68% in 2015, and in 2020 he threw for 4,000 plus yards, but that was like prime time Seahawks. But what I mean to say is his numbers really haven't fallen off.
12 games, right? Or 10 games? How many games did he even play?
Yeah, exactly. So this season, his numbers really haven't fallen off, and Jerry Jeudy, call him like the pretty pick, what do you call it? Pretty pick privilege, where now he's still getting paid on the Browns, and a lot of people are still want him, but he just has not panned out the way the Broncos thought he would. He really pretty much only had Sutton. I think he was maybe fourth most touchdowns in the league last year. He had a pretty good season, but Russell Wilson I don't think is washed. A lot of his stats still line up with his prime. He hasn't fallen off that much. I think in the right situation, like I said, Steelers, their offensive line isn't terrible. It's just kind of there. They got a really promising wide receiver, and their running back is also great. And their defense, we know about the Steelers' defense. That's their entire culture. Mike Tomlin's a defensive coach, and they just hired Arthur Smith, who, if you want to make the argument for the Falcons last year, when Arthur Smith was the head coach, he was maybe a quarterback away from doing something with the Falcons. You know what I mean? And now his prayers have been answered. He has a guy like Russell Wilson. He has a great offense he can run in Pittsburgh. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, but what I'll say about Russell Wilson is if you look at Tomlin, his best years were with Roethlisberger. Mm-hmm. And Roethlisberger, everyone tries to compare Mahomes to this, that, the other thing. The one you can compare him to is Roethlisberger, in that he's got the decent arm. He runs around in the pocket. He's deceptively escapes. And then the next thing you know, he's running up the field for 30 yards, not that fast looking.
Wait, who are you comparing to Roethlisberger right now?
Roethlisberger to Mahomes.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, is there another quarterback out there that's kind of like those guys? Russell Wilson.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, he can move, escape the pocket. He can fling it downfield. He can extend plays. And then, you know, every so often he can turn upfield for like 37 yards, and he can still do that. So, and guys like that, I mean, if you're a consistent quarterback, you either get, you know, eat up and spit out in your first year if you're a quarterback and you never recover. Sometimes after your second year, they figure you out and you never recover. But if you perform in the NFL for 10 years, you're a quarterback. And I think they've been a quarterback away. I think maybe Tomlin just needs a good freelancing type of Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger type of guy, and he'll get it back. But the Steelers, I don't know how they've managed to win the last few years. Throw Russell and Wilson into the conversation, that's a home run for them at $1 million a year. Wow.
So what do you think? Think it's going to work out or no? Are you optimistic?
I think the Steelers are going to be competitive again next year. I don't know whether they're going all the way. I'm not going to sit there and say like, oh, they're going to beat out the Ravens, who just signed Derrick Henry.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
It's like
I would love to be super.
Joe Burrow's going to be back next year. Okay, they're probably going to retain all their wide receivers. They just dumped their tight end off on us and picked up a better one. So
I feel bad.
I don't feel like they're going to. But who thought they were even going to make the playoffs? The fact that they made the playoffs this year means you just can't count them out. That's it.
I'm almost happy for Russell Wilson, but it's also you kind of feel bad for the Steelers a little bit. AFC North is probably the toughest division in football right now. So as much as we can hype up Russell Wilson and how he might be in a great situation, you still got to go against the Ravens, who just signed Derrick Henry, the biggest, baddest running back in the NFL. They still don't really have a wide receiver one, but you never know if Zay Flowers finally does develop into a reliable player. They still have Mark Andrews, and guess what? The MVP, Lamar Jackson, he's still on the team too. Bengals, like you said, Joe Burrow, they still have Chase.
Yeah,
they're going to maybe retain T. Higgins, but if not, they're going to convert him into something else. Yeah. Browns, Deshaun Watson, if he returns to any shell of his former self, all of a sudden that team, Deshaun Watson, all of a sudden that team still has Amari Cooper as wide receiver one on a kind of a discount. They just signed Jerry Jeudy, who, like I was saying before, you ever heard of pretty pick privilege? They gave up a lot for him, even though he hasn't panned out, but he was still supposed to be very good. Yeah. So people are giving him a lot of credit and another chance, and he's supposed to perform very well with the Browns. And they just signed a new running back, Naheem Hines, who isn't bad as well. So if you're Russell Wilson, I'm happy for him because I think he'll finally be able to show that he's not washed, or dispel the accusations of it being over for him. But I really have no idea how well the Steelers actually do.
Well,
We'll
they
see.
did it last year, and by the
They
way,
did.
that division was as good as it gets.